Now, later this week, the Prime Minister will appear at the Infected Blood Inquiry, the public inquiry examining how thousands of patients were infected with HIV and hepatitis C through contaminated blood products in the 70s and 80s. The decisions which led to what is considered the worst treatment disaster in NHS history were taken before Rishi Sunak was born, but he is now under pressure to speed up the compensation payments to affected families. To date, the Leader of the Commons, Penny Mordaunt, gave evidence to the inquiry which had fallen under her remit in her previous role as Paymaster General. She insisted that she had seen no evidence of the government dragging its heels on compensation. Well, Jason Evans is less certain. He leads a group which represents bereaved families.
Today, a group of 6 of us have gone and handed a letter to 10 Downing Street urging the Prime Minister to take action and accept the recommendations of the Infected Blood Inquiry and to start that compensation process before he gives evidence on Wednesday.
So you'd like it to start tomorrow?
Well, look, the government have been in possession of the compensation framework recommendations of Sir Robert Francis Casey since March of last year. They've had them for well over a year. And so I think what we'd like to see is tomorrow or Wednesday for the Prime Minister to say, we're accepting these recommendations and this is the timetable for when it's going to be implemented.
I'd like to get more into that and what the government has or hasn't done in just a moment. But obviously each family has an individual story. Yours does as well. Your father, Jonathan, died when you were just 4 years old, I think. Can you tell us a bit more about what happened to him?
So my father was born with haemophilia, which is a blood clotting disorder, and he was given a treatment called cryoprecipitate up until the mid-1970s. And cryoprecipitate is much like a normal blood transfusion in that one unit comes from one volunteer donor on the NHS. But in the 1970s, a new product was used to treat haemophilia called factor VIII concentrate. And virtually all haemophiliacs in the country, including my own father, were given this product, which was made by mixing together the blood plasma donations of thousands and thousands of people, often from overseas in the US, where people were paid for their plasma. Plasma was collected from prisons. The risks were known from the outset. The inquiry has shown that. My father knew nothing of the risks of hepatitis or HIV. He was infected with both hepatitis C and HIV, and he died when I was 4 years old in 1993 as a result.
And some compensation has been paid. How much and to how many people so far?
Last year, an interim compensation payment of £100,000 was paid to those infected still alive or bereaved families where the infected person was in a relationship at the time of their death. The problem with that is that, first of all, most of the victims of this scandal have died. And secondly, many, if not most, from the FOI, Freedom of Information data that we've seen, our victims were not in a relationship at the time of their death. And the reason for that is because, for example, we know that 380 children were infected with HIV, many of whom died in childhood. Their parents, therefore, have received no recognition through compensation. Many people were simply young adults. Due to the nature of infections, many people were divorced and separated from their partners. And also, there are many cases where someone unwittingly infected their partner, and so someone as a child, both their parents died. So there are all these kinds of ways in which you can be excluded, and it's actually most bereaved families have been excluded.
And what has this done to your family, the fact that obviously not only did you lose a father at a very young age, but that there hasn't been compensation for what happened?
My dad died age 31. I'm now 33. And I have a letter at home from 1990 from my dad's MP of the time saying it was good to see both you and your small child, that small child being me, when you came to see me the other day. And the reason my dad had gone to see his MP was because he was campaigning for compensation on this issue. I'm here now, age 33, having lived my dad's entire lifespan and more, and we're still fighting, still going.
Do you accept what the government has said? They said that they accept the moral case for compensation. It's a case now of the practicalities, because large amounts of money, of course, are involved in this. It's estimated what it's going to be between £5 and £10 billion that will have to be paid out under the compensation scheme.
It's impossible for any estimates to be put on how much this is going to cost until the government tell us which recommendations they are and aren't accepting. One of the things we hear from the government at the minute is this is very complex, but the very purpose of the compensation framework exercise, the very purpose of the infected blood inquiry making that interim report in April was to fully deal, which they did, with the complexities, and the government now has the solution in their hands, and we're saying now, implement it. The first stage of which would be to appoint the chair of the compensation system so that this thing can begin to be put in place.
That's campaigner Jason Evans speaking to me from Westminster. Now, the BBC has approached the government for a response and was told that it accepts the moral case for compensation, and work is ongoing across the UK government and in consultation with the devolved administrations to consider as quickly as possible the recommendations put forward in the inquiry's second interim report.